Now that we've covered spiral bound, let me talk to you about some of the hardbound books I've tried and what it is that I do and don't like about those. Really, there are a lot of things about the spiral sketchbook that are awesome to work with because it does give you that feeling of like being on the go and just being in your process. It can be a little bit more raw. But these, hardbound books can feel so nice, can feel so good to complete an art journal in a hardbound book. It's like you've made a visual imagery book all of your own, and your creative practice feels good in your hands, feels beautiful on a shelf, that sort of thing. They are really wonderful because you have a larger spread, but also, like I mentioned before, they can be a little bit hard to hold. They can require more table space if you're working with that larger format like that. You can't just flip them around like you can with that spiral sketchbook. So for capturing ideas and as kind of a work in progress sort of sketchbook, they're not my favorite. But for doing art journaling, they can be really wonderful. I've brought a few of these larger, like they're mostly close to 9 by 12, these different brands here. And this first one is the Artist's Loft brand, I believe. It's like from Michael's Stores. And actually I tested a couple pages at the beginning, tore them out, thought I would use it for just some ideas and that. But what I was really wanting a sketchbook for was something that I would take with me, like out and about, away from my studio and away from my home. And when it came down to it, this size is not what I like when I'm out and about. The size that I like when I'm out and about is a little bit smaller. So this will be some sort of studio palette sort of book or what have you. What I don't like about this particular brand is the paper quality. I've not been happy with it. It buckles a whole lot. It bleeds weird, and I use a lot of wet media. So it's not been my favorite for that, but it could be, used in different ways, or like I said, palette pages. So that's one that'll get used in a different way. This is a Strathmore series of the hardbound. This was a nice book. It's one of those that has thick mixed media paper. Now it's a 500 series, which means it's a Strathmore with thick paper. But I'll show you right here, this is what I don't like. It doesn't ever really lay flat. Try as you might, you kind of have to weigh it down. And it's not just because I've done all this painting in it, all right? So it's not bad, you can see that. It's not bad, but it just doesn't lay quite flat. And that's one of my absolute musts for a hardbound journal. I really want it to lay flat. I tried to love this, but for that reason, just couldn't get into it. The thickness of the paper and the way it was bound was a little bit tight. And you can actually see, I've had this for some years, but it's not like I'm opening this up like every week or anything. The binding, was coming loose, probably because I'm kind of pushing on it, trying to get it to actually go flat. And that can be a problem you run into with hardbounds. So that's just something to keep an eye at. This I bought, this was recommended by some other artist friends. It's a Moleskine, and it's a large, like maybe an extra large is what they call it. The paper though is a little bit different, I think, than the smaller Moleskines. And honestly, like when it came right down to it, I just wasn't that thrilled with it. Like, it wasn't that great for bigger pieces. It didn't make me all like, in love with it like a lot of people were kind of telling me about it. And so I never finished working with it. And it just wasn't worth the money to me for that hardbound feel. And again, too big for me to kind of just pick up and take with me, on an everyday sort of active creative practice way. So I do like something smaller for an active practice. And so something like this would be like a medium size in my mind. Sort of sketchbook. Now those were hardbound. This is a Strathmore series mixed media that is softbound, and it's a nice size. It's right around 7 by 10 maybe, and I loved this journal, and I would buy these again. The cover gets a little bit dented and things really easily. You can kind of see that it gets some wear on it, and I don't know, I might have rounded these corners. Anyway, so if you look at these and they have a square corner, it could be that I rounded it. Sometimes I do that. The paper again is that mixed media paper, so it's thick, right? So it handles your wet media very well. And I like to do little pages in the back sometimes to test things that I'm using, different, medias and thicknesses and how it works with a new paper. Held collage well, held acrylic, all the different things I like to kind of play with. So I was pretty pleased with that. But again, you can kind of see it doesn't totally have the lay flat, but it was way better than the hardbound of the Strathmore series. So this is a good one. I would recommend this one. If you like that size and you like Strathmore, the soft cover bound and the paper, to me, lays a little bit flatter than my experience with the hardbound. You can take these and instead of having that spiral bound right down the middle, you have a continuous image. And that's what why a lot of people love this style as well over the spiral bound. This was one that I found, I believe, at Barnes & Noble. Not the most ideal paper. It's called a sketchbook. It's more for just drawing and dry media. But I did use wet media in it, as I like to do. Sometimes I kind of like the buckling myself. I don't know, it just has that interesting feeling in your hands when you've got pages that buckle and they're sloppy and raw and all of that. But what I loved about this one, and you can look for this with hardbounds, is hard solid front and back. Does have a nice size if you spread it open, and it lays flat. So again, look for that. That's just such an important feature in my mind. So one more that goes with that hardbound style, but a soft cover, right, is the Lita Art Supply sketchbooks. These are pretty nice. I didn't finish with mine, and it's just a personal preference thing, but these are quality books. If you like a smooth paper, they're very well made. It does have that cream color, kind of like a Moleskine. It does lay flat. There's a nice sewn signature that happens in them. It does a little bit of buckling if you use real wet media, but not much different than a Moleskine will. And it takes the mixed media and the gluing and that kind of fun and can make a really great, again, everyday sort of creative practice journal. Now, my very favorite hardbound size is going to be that traditional kind of Moleskine size. And this one here is a Moleskine. They call this the large size, right? A lot of you've probably used these. If you haven't, they're worth a shot to see if you love them, because a lot of people love them. And I've had a couple and filled them up, and they do work really well. They're surprising how well they work. It doesn't have to be the watercolor paper. It can just be the blank art paper. It still has a nice thickness to it. But I'll tell you, I actually am partial over the Moleskines, which are pricey. I'm partial to this other kind that is the same size, and they're called travel logs. I've been using these for years, and they come in different sizes and colors. They do have that, you know, that standard kind of Moleskine size, or you can get square versions, you can get different, you can get, this is the portrait, you can get a landscape version if you like that. I've never been a big fan of the landscape. They are really nice as well, and I like them a little bit better than the Moleskine. The Moleskine doesn't absorb as well, all right? So it's a little bit slicker, a little bit smoother, doesn't absorb some of the wet media as well. Sometimes it'll kind of beat up on it, whereas these have a little bit better absorbency. They lay flat when they're open. They've got the same pocket in the back like Moleskines that everybody loves. Travelog. Highly recommend those babies. And I love this size because it fits almost in every purse that I would carry. And then this is just one that I brought. Sometimes you do want to splurge and it does become a little bit precious. This was a gift. It's a hardbound Italian journal, and it's made with watercolor paper, so it's lovely paper no matter what I'm using on it, to be perfectly honest. It is a little precious to me, and so it's taking me a while to move through it, but I'm using all kinds of different media in it, and it's fun. It's not perfect, but I love the way it feels in my hand. And so at the end of the day, sometimes that's what matters most. And for me, when it comes to a journal that I'm carrying with me that I can just throw in my purse no matter where I'm going and just pull out and, you know, put a little quote in or do a little sketch in, I like the ones that feel a little more intimate, a little bit smaller, and sometimes that have this hardbound. So I can still do a full spread in these, right? But it's not going to be huge. It still fits on my lap just fine. If I'm going larger, I tend to prefer the spiral bound. I did want to throw in one extra hardbound book that I do like a lot. I said that I don't usually like the landscape books. In the smaller version is where I really don't like them. This one's a little bit bigger. It's more like that 9x12 or 8x12 or something. And this is a different brand. It's a Sea White of Brighton. And I've only used it some, but I really do like this, particularly for working with some studies I was doing in gouaches and that sort of thing. So I was really happy with this. It does buckle a little bit, this paper, but ultimately it lays flat nicely and would flatten better, I know, if I wanted to pull these out and flatten them. But it handles the wet media really well without like bleeding through, despite the fact that it's not too thick, and then just that little bit of buckling that you could manage if you really wanted to. So I did want to put a little shout out about the Sea White of Brighton. I've only had the one notebook of them, but I do like the quality of paper with this as well. So of course, all of these journal and sketchbook ideas are, you know, contextual. They're going to vary for each of us. You're going to find your preferences may be different than mine. But I want to share with you a couple thoughts about handmade journals and sketchbooks too. They are some of my favorite because of what I mentioned with the hardbound ones. There's something special about holding a handmade art journal or book, and that you're going to use not just for like a written journaling, but for some imagery as well too, some symbolism and things like that, and capturing those things in your life. So first I'm going to talk about ones that you purchase and then ones that you might make yourself, and we'll just touch on some ideas with these. So one of my very favorite handmade journals, and you might not think to use this as an art journal. I was even not sure if it would work, but over the years, this is still one of my favorites to pull out and look at again, because everything feels good about this journal. This was like a Nepali handmade paper type of journal. Here it has the signatures that are, you know, sewn on with these little bamboo, they're like bamboo sticks. Actually, I think they're just chopsticks, but same idea. And then the paper is really absorbent. It has a lot of texture to it. You can see that really well, like here with just some white, or rather some paint swipes on it. So it has tooth to it. It's very absorbent. And so what that would mean, if you were to use one of these sort of handmade paper handmade journals, what you want to keep in mind is that if you want, you can glue things in easily, no problem. But the way to prep a page is with a little bit of clear gesso, or just to swipe a base layer color of acrylic, and that's going to give you more of a solid area to write on or to work on with your mixed media or your writing or whatever it is that you're capturing, okay? Otherwise, it can get a little weird. If you have really fluid things, it can kind of blend weird. You might find them at, again, like a Barnes & Noble. It wasn't too expensive when I got this one, and ended up loving it way more than I would have thought. Handmade journals, my very favorite ones are the ones I purchased from other people, although I am going to share with you a little bit about making my own. There is different artists that make these. You can purchase them at different shops and things, and so again, you just want to look for certain qualities. This was made by a New Day Art Studio on Etsy, and I believe she still makes journals. I bought a couple one year, and I loved them all. They're the signature style. Is it Coptic kind of style with different signatures. There's like 5 signatures in here. She's an artist. She plays with mixed media herself, and so she knew to choose a certain type of paper that would hold up well, and her descriptions tell you what her specific journals will work well with. And I was supporting another artist. So those are a couple of my favorites from a few years back. So keeping an eye out for other artists who love to make journals. They can make you some of the best because they know what it is that we might like as artists within the journals in ways that like corporate companies maybe don't. Now, this was another one made by an artist who was a mixed media, and she put this together and sent it to me. And this one had much thicker page, so you can kind of see that. And so that, again, these really nice signatures in here. So if you can find an artist that is also a journal maker, and either get journals from them or learn how to make your own from them, that can be a wonderful way to go. So I have played around with making journals, and I still do this. I make my own different kinds of traveler's notebooks and journals. I just sometimes get the itch to do that. And sometimes I'll sew them, sometimes I glue them, sometimes I just try different projects. This was the biggest one I've done in a while. And this was with a mixed media paper from Canson Notebook, like I shared before, and I just made signatures, and I sewed them in with a tutorial, I believe from Effie Wild, somewhere online. And I used most of it in demos and classes I was doing, and created a canvas cover for it, painted that before putting it together, put a little leather wrap around it. I love the feel of this journal. That said, you can make really simple journals with just copy paper, and I like to make these for written journals to carry. Sometimes I'll just fold copy paper and carry that, but this was sewn into an old jean slab. I did not finish this journal. I had glued this in and was gonna finish the inside covers, never did. Just carried it around how it was, used it. But I loved that when I was carrying it. It was light, and it just had a really nice, like, homey feel to it. This was a planner art journal combination. I forget the name of the project that this was for. Back in 2014, it was a planner project with like Ray Missigman and some other people. And I loved making this journal, but this is what I want to tell you about making your own. It can be quite a project. You're going to put a lot of time and energy into it, resources, you're going to measure things, you're going to do all this. And in the end, you might not like it as much as you think you will. the actual using of it. So that is just something to be aware of. Now, I like the process of learning how to put things together and making them. So I got through this journal like 3 months in, and then I quit using it, even though I had put in all of these calendars. Gosh, I don't even know how to get to the calendars. They're all like hiding or something. I had put in pages from other torn out journals to do art in, and I did some at the beginning, and it was a lot of fun. These things would like pull out. There was little pockets everywhere, and then it just like, I was spending so much time on this, I wasn't doing my other art, and I can get frustrated when that becomes the thing with my planning, my ways of planning. So I kind of just abandoned it. But it's really cool to see and hold and keep as an idea, you know, for future things. Same thing happened with this. This was in the Stars. Kyla Gifthand is a wonderful bookmaker and a wonderful teacher if you do want to learn how to make books. And she walked us through making a book. And so I made this journal for the second year of In the Stars. And honestly, when it came right down to it, I only used it a few times. And I know why it is now that I look at it. The paper that I used, when I glued 2 of those pages together, it buckled so much that I just really didn't like the way it felt. It felt too thick, too stiff. I wasn't very happy with it. And I didn't really know that until I tried to make it. Now, it has some cool pages here. Again, really thick papers that we were using, and then they were glued together, and it made it even thicker. And that is not the feel that I like in my journals. When it comes right down to it. So I ended up not using it a whole lot. I did just a few things, but still it was a cool process to go through, because we glued these signatures in to a canvas wrap like that. So it was really cool to learn about. But again, those handmade journals, if you don't have the time or want to put the energy into making your own, see if you can support artists who do that, because they may have some ideas of what it is you're going to like.